Congressman Byrne. I'm talking to you from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. Let's go ahead and get started. I want to thank all the students and the teachers for making this possible. With us today, we have students from Robertsdale High School in Baldwin County, Murphy High School in Mobile, Washington County Career Technical School in Chatham, and W.S. Neal High School in Escambia County. So welcome to you all. It's good to have you on this program today. You know, this technology is really remarkable. It allows for me to sit here in Washington and for you to be in your high schools, for us to talk with one another real time. And so I'm delighted we have it and delighted we're going to be able to use it today. I want to just briefly walk you through my background and talk to you a little bit about what the average day is like here. I was born and raised in Mobile, graduated from high school there, went to college at Duke in North Carolina, then came back and went to the law school at the University of Alabama, and then moved back to Mobile, where I've been practicing law for over 30 years. My wife Rebecca and I lived and raised our children in Midtown Mobile, not far from Murphy High School, before we moved over to Fairhope about 14 years ago. And that's where our children graduated from high school. We're at Fairhope High School. I've been a lawyer in private practice for over 30 years, but back in the early 90s, I became very involved in efforts to improve public education in Alabama. And one thing led to another, and I was elected to the Alabama State School Board, which governs basically all the regulations and policies, academic standards, and so forth for the state of Alabama. Then elected to the Alabama State Senate that I served in for 5 years, when Governor Riley appointed me to be the Chancellor of Post-Secondary Education for the state of Alabama, which runs all the two-year colleges in the state. I was elected to the Congress in a special election in the fall of 2013. I've been here now about 2 years. In Congress, I serve on 3 committees. One is the Education and Workforce Committee, which is sort of pertinent to what we're doing here today. The other is the House Armed Services Committee that governs everything having to do with the military and national defense. And the third one is the Rules Committee, that is the committee that actually is the committee that runs how we do things on the floor in the House. So these are 3 pretty important committees that take up a lot of my time, but I enjoy doing it. Average day for me starts usually about 8 o'clock in the morning. I try to go into the gym before that and get a workout, and I see a lot of members of the House there, and sometimes we talk business, sometimes we don't. But we start with our meetings today about 8 o'clock. Today is not an unusual day. We've had people from both Spring Hill College and the University of South Alabama here today to talk about some higher education issues. And then we'll have committee meetings during the day. We've got one of those coming up in the Education Committee where we're marking up a bill. And we'll spend some time in committee. Then there's always time we spend on the floor. We vote on the floor of the House every day. So we'll be on the floor of the House this afternoon with a very important bill, a 2-year budget bill. But we're voting on something every day. It's not unusual for us to be going into the evening with that. Sometimes we have Rules Committee meetings that go into the night. Last night we were at the Rules Committee until midnight, so sometimes that can be very late. But usually every night we have some sort of a meeting with a group that's in town or meeting with constituents or whatever. And that's going to be true tonight when many of the members of the House from the southern states will get together and have our monthly meeting where we just sit and talk and share information about what's going on. So that's an average day. I start about 8 and it usually ends somewhere between 8 and 10 o'clock in the evening. Last night ending at midnight was a little late for me. Okay, so that sort of tells you a little bit about me and about what an average day is here. Let's get to your questions. Looks like our first question is going to be from Jose Rivas from Robertsdale High School.
Good morning, my name is Jose from Robertsdale. I would like to ask you, which committees are you a member of?
You can't hear you. Speak up and get a little closer to it.
I was going to go ahead with your question. I didn't hear you.
No. Got to squat down.
Yeah.
Ask your second question.
Which committees are you a member of?
All right, and I think the question was, what are your legislative priorities?
Okay.
Well, I have some local legislative priorities and I have some national ones. My local ones are, I want to make sure we continue to have funding for the production of the Navy ships we are presently producing at the Austell shipyard in Mobile. That employs almost 5,000 people, so that's very important in our area. We're trying to get a new bridge, I-10 bridge, built across the Mobile River because we have such backups and traffic there. And the third local one is we're trying to get it fixed and get our regular snapper season back because we've lost our red snapper season because of inappropriate overregulation by the federal authorities. Up here nationally, I'm very strong on national defense. I think we've weakened ourselves over the last couple of years, and we need to strengthen ourselves, not just in the Middle East, but in Europe and Asia, and make sure we're protecting ourselves here at home. I think we need to balance our budget up here. We're running huge deficits. I think that hurts the country. And by the way, that leads the debt we pile up to you have to pay off. We spend the money today, and your generation will have to pay it back. I don't think that's fair. You've got to get our economy going again. The economy is not growing at a very fast pace. In order for you and for your colleagues to have the jobs that you want to get when you get out of college, or when you leave high school if you want to go directly to the workplace, you need to have a robust economy. We don't have a very robust economy right now. Part of the problem is the federal government. We're doing some things that I don't think we should be doing that's burdening the economy. So those are some very high points of what my legislative priorities are. Okay, next question is going to come from Megan McKay from Murphy High School. Megan?
What are your plans to reform Medicare and Social Security?
Thank you very much. Two very important programs, Social Security and Medicare. Let me make sure we all understand what we mean when we say that. Social Security is a program that pays you a monthly payment when you get to retirement age. For me, that's when I turn 67 or 68. That's the way they've redone that for my age group. Medicare provides most of your health care costs when you turn 65. Now, at your age, you don't think about this. I'm 60 years old. Let me tell you, as you get older, you have more health care costs. It's just part of getting older. And so that program is important to older people, particularly people who are retired, and many of them have physical and other health issues. We've had the Social Security program since the 1930s. We've had Medicare now for all 50 years. So people have planned their retirement around those two programs. They've had money taken out of their paychecks to pay for it, and they rightfully expect that those programs will be there for them when they retire. The problem is that people are living so much longer than they were predicted to live when those programs were set up that we've not been setting aside enough money. Now, it's a good thing that people are living longer. I think that's a wonderful thing. Unfortunately, though, we're going to run out of money, excuse me, very quickly here if we don't make some changes. Now, a couple of common sense changes. One is as people are living longer, they can work longer. And so, for example, my age group used to be you can retire at 65. We were told we can't retire until 67. We may need to push that back even further so that you continue to get full benefits, but you don't get the benefits until you get to a later age. We would phase that in and give that to people that are currently in Social Security. But we give that to people far enough out to where they can do it. On Medicare, we're going to do the same thing. People are going to be living longer, they're going to work longer, which means we push off that age at which we become eligible for Medicare. If we did those things, it would take a whole lot to save an awful lot of money. Then we can maintain the safety and security of those two programs. So I'd like to work with that. It's going to be controversial to do those things. But if we don't do them starting now, we're not going to have Social Security and Medicare when you retire. And while everything will be okay for me and my generation, it won't be okay for you and your generation, and I don't think that's fair. Okay, let's go to another question. This one from Sam Frazier at WSBO High School. And everybody don't get carried away too much about your football game Friday night there. I've been to the Battle of the Creek before, so hope everybody's got the camo on. I can see get all fired up in the game, but don't get too carried away. Okay, here's the question here from Sam.
Thank you, Congressman Byrne. My question is, as the world's population approaches 9 million in the near future, how we look to support the local farmer agriculture so the U.S. all its people and other nations in the new.
Great question, Sam. You know, the number one industry in the state of Alabama is agriculture. And sometimes we can get carried away with some of the other new industries we're bringing here, but agriculture is our number one industry. And the truth of the matter is that American farmers don't just feed America. American farmers feed the world. And we have really produced a miracle with how much we're able to produce, even on a per acre basis. And so having an sure and secure agricultural system is important to everybody in the United States. It's important to the economy in Alabama. It's important to the world. We passed an agricultural bill last year, a 5-year bill, that started making some immediate changes in those programs. Now, some of you in the room know, because either you or your families are involved in farming, that farming is not like any other industry. Mother Nature is Mother Nature. If we have a bad freeze at the wrong time, it could hurt a crop. If you have too much rain or not enough rain, it could harm a crop. So there's a reason to have a federal program in there to try to smooth out those problems. And also give technology and other help to our farmers so they can continue to be most productive in the world. I was proud to vote for that bill last year. It was controversial, but I was proud to vote for it. I worked with a lot of the farmers in my district and across the state of Alabama on it. And I intend to continue to support farm policies that make sense for farmers and for people that consume what farmers produce, because that's good for America and it's good for my district. So thanks for that question. All right, we didn't get any questions on a previous basis from the folks in Washington County. Is there somebody from Washington County that wanted to ask me a question?
I'm actually emailing back.
I'm sorry I didn't hear you. Could you get a little bit closer and say it again?
Do you agree with President Obama that there is too much testing in schools?
That there's too much kissing at school?
Testing.
Testing, yes, yes. I do agree with him. Sorry about that, I can't hear so well. Yeah, I think we are over-testing you, and I think you know it because you're having to go through all these batteries of tests. And let me take a little bit of blame for that. When I was on the state school board, I and other school board members across the country started this process of putting in accountability tests so that we can know whether our schools were doing what they need to be doing. Well, it's one of those good ideas. If you carry it out to its extreme, it actually becomes harmful. And we've over-tested you. And that takes away time from your studying time, your learning time, the times you need to spend on actually learning new things. And it also gets you focusing on just what you need to do well on a test and not the other things that come with being in a real educational environment. So I think he's right. I don't often agree with President Obama, by the way. I think this time he's right. I think we need to take a hard look at all these tests that we're putting out there to our students. And I'd like to see us start to cut back on them and work with our teachers to come up with a common sense solution here. So thanks for that question. It's a good one. Let's go to Rebecca Lomax, Robert Staleton's.
Just grab your question and come up and you speak loudly.
Okay. What is your stance on the legalization of marijuana in Alabama?
Thank you. Very important question. Marijuana is a dangerous drug. It's also a gateway drug. Now, when you're young, you don't always see this, but I can tell you from years of experience as a lawyer, from serving on the board with the Drug Education Council in Mobile, and just seeing what marijuana has done to people that I know, I think marijuana is a bad thing for people, and I do not want to see it legalized. Not just for what marijuana itself can do to you. We know what they can do to you physically, what it can do to your brain, particularly when you're younger. But it's a gateway drug, and it so often leads to people getting on much, much more addictive drugs that literally ruin their lives. So I would not favor the legalization of marijuana anywhere in America. Let's find other ways to have fun that are good for your body and don't put you in a position where you could find yourself just in a ruinous position that ruins your life and ruins the lives of people around you. Okay, let's go to, make sure I say this right, DeKayla Stewart Ruffin from Murphy High School.
Hi.
Hey, DeKayla.
I met you last year in Washington.
I remember that.
My question is, given the growth of the surveillance state through the use of drones, the TSA and the Patriot Act, do you think the Fourth Amendment is being thrown by the wayside? What would you do to stop the federal government's intrusion into people's personal lives?
Very important question. I am very concerned about the use of drones. They're appropriate for us to use for military purposes. They're appropriate for law enforcement to use under certain very carefully restricted circumstances. We need to make sure we include protections for people's privacy in that, by the way, and make sure due process is followed. I'm most worried about what people who are neither in the military or in public safety are doing with drones. Somebody, and drones are becoming less and less expensive, somebody can buy a drone, put a video camera on it, fly it into your backyard, and essentially snoop on you. And I'm worried about that. And I think we should all be worried about that. So one of the things we have working on here in Washington is some legislation is trying to get at that. Because the drone technology is great, but let's make sure that it's not going to be used by anybody in the military, by anybody in public safety, or by some private citizen who's using it for some other reason, so that nobody in any of those different groups are using drone technology in a way that violates your right to privacy or my right to privacy. Sometimes drones need to be used in public safety and on the battlefield. Let's make sure that they're used there appropriately and that they're not used otherwise in ways that could interfere with the privacy of our lives. Okay, the next question is going to come from Jordan Grantham from W.S. Neal.
Why haven't those who oppose Obamacare thought about extending Medicare benefits to those under 65 who are without insurance as an alternative to Obamacare?
Thank you. Good question. Remember what Medicare is. Medicare is a program that's not a welfare program. For example, I have been paying into the Medicare program since I was younger than you are, because that's when I started working. And that money was taken out of my paycheck. It's been taken out of my paycheck now for over 40 years. So Medicare is not the same thing as a welfare program. Obamacare is like a welfare program because we give money or provide money that helps people pay their health insurance premiums. So you'd be blending two things together that are not the same thing. And you could jeopardize the long-term financial security of the Medicare fund by trying to put Obamacare beneficiaries in there. Now, I think Obamacare has failed, and I'm ready to repeal it and replace it with something else. But the something else I would replace it with would actually give more freedom and an opportunity to select what people want to our healthcare consumers. So you would be able to pick the healthcare you wanted based upon what your needs are and by what you're willing to pay. And then we would have some system in place that we would make sure that people with pre-existing conditions were taken care of. But I would not blend Medicare with Obamacare because I think that would do some harm to Medicare, and Medicare is going to need some help to continue to stay in existence. Okay, let's see. Do we have another question that the group in Washington County wants to ask?
Be able to remain in Washington County and raise families. As the congressman from our area, what can you do to help bring industry and jobs to this area so that we can stay in our county?
Excellent question. Love Washington County. Been there many times, working with your county commissioners, your probate judge, and the great mayor you've got there in Chatham. You've got some pretty good industry already in Washington County, and I think what we should do is work by building off of that. You know, we've got over there in the eastern part of the county, a number of places where we already have industry, and there's lots of land that those industries have actually set aside for growth. And what they like to do is sell that land to other industries that are like type of industries to go there. So I've been working with your local economic developer and your local officials to try to attract more plants like the ones you've already got to that area where you already have plants. Now, I think one of the key things for Washington County is that we get a branch of Bishop State Community College up there in Chatham. The mayor and city council have already set aside some land for that. I've been working with the people that run the two-year college system in Montgomery. We have a brand new president at Bishop State, and so she's just really getting her feet up under her. We'll be working with her because the more workforce training skills we can provide to people in Washington County, the more that they've got, the more we can use that as a selling tool with people that would think about coming there. Every part of my district is important. I don't care if it's the spot where Airbus is or if it's a rural area like Washington County. And we work with all of our local officials, all the economic developers in my district to make sure we're doing everything we can to grow our district and every part of our district economically and otherwise. So be sure we're working on that. Okay, let's go to a question from Megan Nordberg from Robertsdale High School.
How do you think public education in Alabama can be improved?
Thank you. Very important question. That's what I spent a lot of years on. Well, right now, we're doing real damage to the public education system in Alabama. The legislature, in order to solve a problem in the general fund, the fund where we don't fund education, is literally taking money away from the education fund. And because of that, there have been very little increases to what the state's actually providing in funding for your schools. Also, and this is terrible, we have not given a pay raise to the public school teachers in Alabama since 2007. Now, our teachers are great teachers. They don't do it for the money because they could be doing other things for the money. But it's unfair to them that we have not found a way to provide pay raises to our teachers. And what sort of a signal does it send out to people that we hope will become teachers in the future, that we've gone 8 years without a real pay raise for our teachers? So I think that's really important that we find a way over a series of years to begin to step up what we pay our teachers, because our teachers are the most important ingredient in education. The student has to be a learner, but the teacher has to be there to provide the teaching for it to work. I think we need to find more ways to help our teachers. The other thing I would do, and I feel very strongly about this because I saw it work so much when I was the chancellor of the two-year college system, is I would grow our dual enrollment program where you could earn credit while you're in high school at Robertsdale High School and also earn credit at Faulkner State Community College, either in one of their academic courses or in one of the technical fields that they offer training in. This works. It works very well. It helps everybody. It helps the student, it helps the student's family, it helps the community, it helps the state. So I try to grow those technical offerings in particular for high school students so they can go ahead and get started on their career preparation even before they leave high school. If we start doing things like that, with all of the good economic news that we're having, particularly in our part of the state, the future can be very bright for you and your generation, because I want you to stay in your community just like I want those students in Washington County to stay in their community. Okay, let's go to a question from Lucas Brunson from Murphy High School.
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
All right, what would you do to restore the principles held by our founding fathers and get back to the Constitution?
Great question, Lucas. Very important that you asked that question at Murphy High School. My mother graduated from Murphy High School, and my mother was a big part of teaching me about what we've inherited in this country from the Constitution and from our founding fathers. We have wandered away from the Constitution here in Washington because we've got the government up here doing things that the founding fathers never intended for us to do. We need to go back and re-look at what the federal government should be and what it should not be, and do the things we're supposed to do and not do these other things that we're really not supposed to be involved in. Let me give you a small example. Right now, that government agency that's telling us that we can't have a regular snapper season, the reason they're telling us that is that when they go out to do their sampling, they're sampling away from reefs. And we know that red snapper grow on reefs. So if you don't sample on reefs, you're going to vastly undercount the size of the fish stock. If you do that, then you think there are not very many fish out there. You say there can only be a week-long season, which is what we've got. The people at the University of South Alabama have a different program where they actually take high-tech submersibles, put them on, in the where the reefs are, look at the reef column, count fish, and they get a much more accurate count of the fish. Now that's a state university that's closest to where this should be done, making that decision. So there's a place where the federal government needs to let the states operate, because the states know better how to do that than the federal government. And collecting that science is so important. But I can multiply that across a million other things here in Washington. Let's get the federal government back to what it's supposed to do. Most importantly, we need to make sure that the federal government understands that the government proceeds from the people. The government's not there to lord it over the people. The government's supposed to be responsive to the people. And sometimes up here in Washington, we forget that. And when we forget that, we start to trample on your individual rights. And our founding fathers put this country together to guarantee those rights, to make sure that the right to life, the right to liberty, the right to happiness, the right to own your own property and do with your property what you want, that those freedoms aren't taken away from us by a government that's overly intrusive in our lives. So bringing those principles back here to Washington are very important to me, and I appreciate your asking that question. Okay, let's go to Jasmine Carter at W.S. Neal.
We know that education is certainly a passion of yours, but what is your opinion of the current one-size-fits-all approach to state testing and accountability when we know that we attend school with diverse learners with very different educational needs? It hardly seems fair to make all students take the same test and then use that composite score to grade and compare our school to other schools in Alabama.
Yeah, thanks. You know, that's kind of very close to the question where I was asked earlier about whether I thought President Obama was right that we're testing people too much. Well, it's once again, we started out with an idea that was good 20 years ago, and we just expanded it and expanded it and expanded it, and things have gotten carried away. We need to allow as much autonomy as we can to the individual classroom teacher, because that's who's really responsible at the end of the day for making sure that you're being taught what you're supposed to be taught, that you're learning what you need to learn. The more autonomy we can give our teachers, the better off they are. The more paperwork we put on our teachers, and the federal government's bad about putting paperwork on education. Let me tell you, we're terrible about that. The more paperwork we put on our teachers, the more restrictions we put on what they can do, the less they have the autonomy to be teaching you. So we at the federal level, and I would say for my years at the state level, I think we need to do this at the state level too, we need to be looking for ways to back off of what we're trying to force our teachers to do. Now, all of us should be held accountable for our jobs. We all should be held accountable. I have to be held accountable for my job, and teachers should be held accountable for their jobs too. But let's take all these silly paperwork and regulations that are just getting in the way of true instruction and learning. Let our teachers do their jobs, and then I think we'll see a good work product out of it for the students in Alabama. I think our teachers will feel better about what they're doing. Thank you. I think it's time to go back to a question from Washington County.
How do you feel about gun control?
I'm against gun control. I'm a big Second Amendment person. The Founding Fathers, when they put the Second Amendment there in the Bill of Rights, were very clear about what they were doing. We had the right to own guns. There are people in Washington that want to take that right away from us. And I stood up and fought against that every chance I've gotten. Now, if you have a right to have a gun, you also have a responsibility to use that gun in a safe manner. And if you have a responsibility, then you can and should go to jail and lose your guns or lose your right to have guns. So we need to make sure that we preserve the right to own guns, but if you breach that responsibility, if you hurt somebody with a gun, if you're unsafe with a gun, then you could and should lose your freedom, and you should lose your right to have that gun. I feel strongly about both of those things. Let's protect the right to have guns, Let's also make sure people know that they've got to be safe with them and that there are real penalties to pay if they're not. Okay, let's go to Andrew Williams from Robertsdale High School.
Hey, Congressman. My name is Andrew. My question for you today is, how can you justify the removal of women's rights by taking away funding from Planned Parenthood? Thank you.
Was your question about Planned Parenthood?
Yes, sir. Do I need to restate it, or?
Yes. Yeah, I heard it.
Okay.
I think Planned Parenthood is an organization that should be funded by private money, not by public taxpayer money. I have seen the videos that were taken earlier this year of Planned Parenthood officials that literally are taking live babies, killing them, and selling their body parts. I find that abhorrent. I find it like something out of some macabre novel that they would do that. But we take $500 million of taxpayer money and we fund that organization. Worse, we know that the Planned Parenthood Clinic in Mobile, last year, they performed 2 abortions within 6 months on the same 14-year-old girl. And under state law in Alabama, they have an obligation to report suspected abuse. If a 14-year-old girl comes in pregnant twice in 6 months, clearly that's evidence that should be given to local law enforcement authorities that she's been abused. So an organization that is that cavalier about the law and that treats human life with such little regard, I don't think should be receiving taxpayer dollars. If private citizens want to say it, send their money to them, that's their business. But I don't think we should take taxpayer money and give it to Planned Parenthood. Now, what we do have in our bill about that is that we would take that money, instead of going to Planned Parenthood, it would go to community health clinics where women can go and get the same services that they've been getting at Planned Parenthood, and in fact, a lot more services, because Planned Parenthood has narrowed down what they offer to women. If you go to a community health care clinic, you've got a much more wider variety of services that they'll offer to you if you're a woman than you do at Planned Parenthood. So I think it's actually better for women if we allow them to go to these community health care centers and get better treatment, more wide and diverse array of treatment than they're presently getting at Planned Parenthood. Okay, let's see. Let's go to Shannon Lindsay from Murphy High School.
Number 5.
Why do you, am I here? Why do you think that changing the political party in power doesn't really change policy very much?
Well, I think I disagree with your premise. I think it does. Let me give you 2 examples. In 1980, when Ronald Reagan was elected and the Republicans took the U.S. Senate for the first time in a long time, huge changes occurred in tax policy and defense policy. The economy was in terrible shape when he took over, and it improved dramatically. So there's a great example of where it changed. Another example, when President Obama was elected in 2008 and he got super majorities in the House and the Senate, that's when he passed Obamacare. That's when he's passed a number of the programs that have become so controversial over the last several years. These were major changes that occurred when he was elected along with the majority of Democrats to the House and the Senate. So it does make a difference. Now, sometimes it takes a couple of elections for that to occur. And so the Democrats won the midterm elections in 2006, but they weren't able to do everything they wanted because President Bush was still president. It took that second election in 2008 for it to really kick in. Republicans won the House back in 2010 and the Senate back last year, but you can't get all the gains that Republicans would like to get until there's a Republican president. So there will have to be a Republican president elected in next year's elections for the Republican side to realize all the things that we want to realize from those midterm elections. So I do think it makes a lot of difference. Sometimes it doesn't happen all at once, but I do think it makes a lot of difference. And if I haven't said this before now, let me make sure I say this loud and clear. If you haven't already registered to vote, go register to vote. And don't forget to vote every time it's time to vote. The problem in our elections these days is that people aren't voting. We have a lot of people out there that don't bother to register. A lot of people registered who just don't show up and vote. And if you don't vote, it's like your voice is not heard in the political system. So please register, and please make sure you vote every time that you can. Okay, let's go to Anna Simmons from W.S. Neal.
It doesn't matter. What is being done at the federal level to fully fund the individuals with disabilities, or at least increase the percentage found?
Well, you know, this bill we'll be voting on this afternoon has in it a lot of changes to the Disability Insurance Fund. Let me explain this a little bit. We talked about Social Security earlier. Social Security is a fund that we pay into by taking money out of our checks. It goes into a fund that pays us money when we get to be retirement age. Some of the money taken out of our check also goes into a disability fund. So if we're determined to be truly disabled, we get payments out of that fund because we can't work anymore. That fund, the disability fund, has been drained of money because we've had such a tremendous increase of people in there. So the bill that's going to be before the House this afternoon makes a lot of changes to that program because we're worried that there's some people getting disability payments who really aren't eligible, but it also finds a way to restore some funding, some new funding to it that will make that fund actuarial and solvent. So money will be there to pay to people who truly are in need of help because they are disabled. So that is actually something we're going to be voting on the floor of the House this afternoon. Okay, let's go back to Washington County. Do we have another question from Washington County?
How soon do you think Iran will get a nuclear weapon, and when will they use it?
Well, the president agreed to an agreement with Iran earlier this year that does a number of things that I think are bad. The first one is that it will allow Iran to obtain a nuclear device, probably by creating their own nuclear device. Now, the president would disagree with me if he was here. He would say, oh, no, it doesn't do that, but it does. I've talked to experts across the board, and we think sooner rather than later they will have achieved the ability to produce a nuclear device. In the meantime, this agreement allows them to go out and buy all sorts of other weapons, including intercontinental ballistic missiles. An intercontinental ballistic missile is a missile that can go across continents. That's what intercontinental means. Well, Iran doesn't need an ICBM to get at Israel. Israel's on the same continent with Iran. They need an ICBM if they want to hit us. So this deal gives them the ability to buy or develop on their own these long-range missiles so they can deliver a nuclear weapon to America. The last thing that the deal did that I thought was so bad is that it essentially allows Iran to obtain $150 billion that are frozen in bank accounts around the world and to sell their oil in the international market, which will allow them over the next several years to make several $100 billion more. And what they will do with most of that money is they will use it to buy weapons, like I said, develop their nuclear weapons, but they are also the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. And they've been sponsoring terrorist groups like Hamas, like the Hezbollah there in Lebanon and Syria, like the Houthis in Yemen, and some other bad folks. So that agreement will get the Iranians a nuclear weapon, it will give them the ability to deliver a nuclear weapon to us, and will give them the money that they want so that they can go out and fund terrorist activity around the world. I think it was an awful deal, and that's why I voted against it when I had an opportunity to here in Congress. Okay, let's go to Emily Pierce at Robertsdale.
Illegal immigration, on amnesty for illegal immigrants.
Thank you. I'm against amnesty for illegal immigrants. Let me explain why. We have a lot of legal immigrants living in Southwest Alabama. I meet them all the time. Some of them have achieved their citizenship. Some of them are in the process of achieving their citizenship. Some of them here on a temporary basis because of a particular job they're doing, like with Airbus or with some of the other foreign plants that we've got. Those people, particularly the ones that have achieved their citizenship, have played by the rules. They've gone through a long and difficult process to become a citizen of the United States. I think it is unfair to them. I think it dishonors them if we turn to another group of immigrants who didn't play by the rules, who didn't go through that long process, and just say, okay, we're just going to make you a citizen. I think that's unfair. It also makes a mockery of the rule of law in our country. If we've got a law that says this is what you've got to do to become a citizen, we can't just sort of say, okay, you didn't do that, we're going to make you a citizen, or we mock the very law that we passed. Now, do we need to have some immigration reforms in this country? Absolutely. And I've come out for that time and time again. But I will not support amnesty for people who've broken the law and coming into this country. We can work with some other things to try to deal with this problem, but I'm not for giving people amnesty. Well, it looks like we're out of time. Y'all were great. That's some really hard questions. I really want to thank you for your questions. Thank all the students again. Teachers, thank you for being there and setting this up. If we didn't get to your question, please email it to me online at byrne.house.gov, and we'll get you an answer. Please stay engaged with my office by using our social media. Go on Facebook at U.S. Representative Bradley Byrne, Twitter at Rep Byrne, Instagram Rep Byrne, and our e-newsletter, which you can get weekly by signing up for it and go to our website, byrne.house.gov. A lot of people like that email, by the way, and it really works for them. So sign up for our email. Stay in touch with us. Stay engaged. We love having you in our area. We're looking forward to you staying in our area. Do well in school. Have a great holiday at Thanksgiving. Goodbye.